All right, so this is going to be the mini lesson for the Stamp Act, one of the causes of the Revolutionary War. So here's some of our W's for the Stamp Act. Why? It was in response to the debt from the French and Indian War that you just talked about in the French and Indian War video. The Stamp Act was one of the first ways that we're going to tax the colonists by putting a stamp on paper and documents. There's our what. So that meant newspapers. And remember, this is a middle class revolution and an upper class. So those newspaper owners, the businessmen, they're the ones who are going to get angry at this. And they're going to use their pull to convince lower classes. When did it happen? 1765. So 2 years after the proclamation of 63. Who? Very mad colonists and the English Parliament, which remember is like the US Congress. They make decisions for citizens. The citizens have voted for them. Here are some sample stamps they'd have. If you didn't have this stamp, you couldn't distribute paper or pamphlet, anything, books, etc. Don't forget, you can be filling in your timeline as we go through all of this stuff or at the end. Just make sure you fill it out. So you could go ahead and put Stamp Act in that 1765 square. Okay? All right. The colonists' reaction to the Stamp Act was they were very angry. They saw the tax as unfair. And they said this was unfair because they said, we don't have any representation in Parliament. This phrase, no taxation without representation, comes out of the Stamp Act. A lot of people really focus on this taxation word in this phrase, but that's not the most important word. The most important word is representation. People don't mind paying taxes if they feel like they have a say in who decides what taxes they pay. That's how Congress works today, and that's how Parliament was working back then. So the colonists were like, we don't have a single representative who gets a vote in Congress. We have no representation. If Parliament had given them representation, this might have been a non-issue. We don't know. We don't like to use ifs in history, but that's a big if. So the British response to this claim of no taxation without representation is you have representation. It's called virtual representation. And virtual representation, that word virtual is like when you play a computer game. You might be shooting someone, but you're not actually shooting someone. It's not real. That's exactly how this representation was. There was someone who was there who could speak for the colonies. They did not have a vote. And Parliament said, well, we represent all English citizens. So in a sense, you have representation. You just don't have someone who's elected from the colonies to vote. And they also said, you need to pay more of this money because that debt that we took on was a war to protect you. We were protecting your land. As we know, colonists didn't really like that virtual representation argument. The colonists decide that they're going to boycott, meaning they will not buy British goods. They're not going to pay the tax, so there's going to kind of be this black market, and they're going to protest. The British response to those things is it got too much, and so they repealed it. It was costing Britain more money to enforce a tax than they were getting back from that tax if everyone was paying it. So if you do something and you really want something to change, so you're a colonist and you're at home and your parents are like, clean your room, and you just don't clean your room, you protest, you don't clean your room, and after a while your parents just get too annoyed to ask you to clean your room. They just say, fine, you can leave it messy. What does that teach you? It teaches you that if you whine enough, you're going to get your way. That's exactly what the colonists thought. They didn't think or know really about Britain's finance stuff. This whole, the tax was costing them more, so it was actually more logical to get rid of it. They just saw, if we protest enough, and we boycott, and we're loud enough, we can convince Britain to do what we want. That's a quick lesson they learned very early on in these protests, and that's going to be a driving force for all the other protests they have. They think, we just need to be louder. We just need to be more violent. We just need to be more of a nuisance to Britain. All right, you need to add the Stamp Act to your timeline, and then you are going to do an activity, and I will explain that. All right, for your activity, you are going to look at 3 excerpts from the London Magazine, October, November, and December, when the Stamp Act was in effect. It kind of covers some things you need to know about the Stamp Act. So you're going to read through those, and then you're going to complete drawings that show the main parts of that reading. So your reading needs to show me that you understood what was happening, and you're going to pick out and include as many details as possible. This is high quality work. It needs to be colorful, and you need to use up the whole square. Lots of details. Don't just pick one. Try to cover as many as you can. You're going to do that for each of them, and then glue the readings and the drawings into your notebook when you're done. All right, and here is a list of everything you need. Check this sheet, and it will tell you the page numbers for the Stamp Act. Also, make sure to go back in and fill in this square as well, telling me the effect. So why was it important? Remember, we talked about what did they learn from British kind of getting rid of the Stamp Act? How is that important for the Revolutionary War starting? All right.